Okay, why am I teaching this class? I thought I'd give you a little bit on my background and talk a little bit about the business of database. One of the largest computer companies out there, Oracle. Larry Ellison is the founder. He worked on SQL early and then left IBM and bought this company, renamed it Oracle, and they built a database based on SQL. Last I saw, he was worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 billion. Now, a good portion of this does not come from the database. It comes from Oracle Financials, their accounting system. But even so, it runs on top of the Oracle database, and they made billions on the Oracle database alone. So, Oracle, okay. When I first started working in database, I wasn't using Oracle. I was using a thing called PIC, P-I-C-K. And there were some advantages to it, but I went to IBM and they wanted to build a project based on Oracle, so I learned Oracle. The hard way. I sat down with a stack of books about literally this thick, the manuals for the database, and I started reading them cover to cover, which is not exactly the most entertaining. I would go into the lab, work during the daytime. They didn't have that much for me to do. It was the beginning of the project. And then I would go home, eat dinner, come back to the lab at night, and from, say, 6 o'clock to midnight every night for weeks, I read the manuals. And out of that, I managed to build a dynamic system for them. And that system was for a GIS project. And that dynamic system, okay, allowed us to access the database from C code and build dynamic queries on it. And it was the basis of Oracle's Oracle Call Interface that they later released as a library. Now, the project I was on failed, but the library is still around, and if you use Oracle today, you're using OCI version 8. So I went on to build 2 consulting companies, and they were both around Oracle. I built the first one for somebody else. Okay, I was the senior recruiter and senior developer in the company, and made the hiring decisions and ran the company and learned the consulting business. So I did an Oracle consulting company. And during that time frame, I also got Oracle certified for a bunch of stuff. Okay, so I did an Oracle consulting company. And we had a bunch of clients. I left that company because, yes, I figured out the numbers, and the guy owning it was making around $400K a year. Okay, and I was making around 150. And I was doing 90% of the work. So, I decided that that was not a good deal, and I formed my own consulting company. And I did the same job that I was doing here, but I did it where I was the person making the big bucks instead of somebody else. Now, there's some things that you should know about making the big bucks. For instance, I placed 2 people at Lucent. Lucent had a terrible reputation, but I was just starting out as a consulting company, and I really needed to place some people. So I placed 2 people at Lucent. The reason they had a terrible reputation is because they didn't pay on time. Basically, you'd submit a bill to them, and the bill was net 120. And that means after 120 days they were supposed to pay it. And instead, they would send you a nasty letter saying they didn't actually owe this. And then you would send them a nasty letter saying, yes, you do. Okay? And then they would send you another nasty letter saying, no, we don't. And then you would send them another nasty letter that was even nastier saying, yes, you do. And then they'd pay you. And by this time, 120 had become 180. And most of you are saying 180 days. Yes, this means that you paid a person to work for them, and 6 months later, about 180 days, you got the money from Lucent to pay the paychecks you'd been paying for 6 months. And if this happened once, this would be bad, but this happened every single month, which means that out of this money that I had to carry 2 people's paychecks for 6 months and float them the money up front because they were happily being paid, and pay for their health insurance and their benefits and their vacation time and whatever else. But because of this, I got to charge Lucent quite a bit of money. And I did eventually end up making, this kind of money out of the consulting business. I also, after that, got interested in Oracle tuning and spent a summer going around basically just doing short-term 1-day, 2-day, 3-day projects for people in the Denver area doing tuning. This is basically where you take a query or their system, find the bad queries in it, show them how to fix those bad queries, add some indexes, fix some things, and leave and go on to the next person. So in one single summer, I worked for 37 people. That's enough to make your head spin. And I actually don't put the list of the 37 on my resume. In fact, by now, I've probably forgotten half of them. Because, it was just like a whirlwind. Like, Monday I'd be over here, and Wednesday and Thursday I'd be at a different place, and Friday I'd be working for somebody else, and I'd be back for those people the next Monday, and I'd have reports to write for each of them. Not long, but a page or two each, and here's what we did, and I'd hunt down problems, and I'd fix them. And out of that summer, yes, you get paid a lot. I was charging, $2,000, $3,000 a day. So say $6,000 a week. About on average, times 18, 20 weeks. Okay, you can do the math. But this starts to add up real fast. Okay? And there were plenty of weeks when it wasn't 6,000. There was one that I did for a company in Denver for Samsonite, the luggage company. I think it's Samsonite. And that one, I think I charged them $18,000 for 2 days worth of work. So, short term, fix their problem, make some good money. A person could still go back out and get good at performance tuning databases, probably Oracle, but maybe SQL Server, and do this kind of work. And if you do presentations at whatever the local thing is and you build a web presence, you could still go out and build a consulting business doing this kind of stuff and charge that kind of money. Now, an important facet of this is I got a reputation for thinking outside the box. And that outside the box spread to Oracle's own consulting group. And one day they called me up and said, yes, we're having trouble with a high-end client that we can't seem to get their stuff to work. And I said, oh? And they said, yeah. Is there any chance you have time to come and take a look at this? And I said, I charge a lot of money. And they said, we don't care. We're on contract to these people. We'll pay whatever it takes if you can fix it. And I said, where? And they wanted me to fly out to someplace and work for this company that at that point I'd not really heard of called FedEx. And they were putting in a tracking system. Now, most of you remember, you've seen tracking systems. Everybody has them today. They scan the packages. They tell you where they're at. Well, FedEx was the first one to put in a tracking system. And they had 5 big computers running Oracle to do this tracking system. And they were not keeping up with their simulated data. They were load testing it, and it wasn't keeping up. And I looked at it, I poked through this stuff. The Oracle consultants that worked for Oracle, that had years of experience tuning, had been through this multiple times. And I looked at it and I went, wow. They think I'm going to pull off some sort of a miracle here. And I thought about it for a while, and I can remember at some point, I told one of the Oracle consultants to go out and get me some good coffee. And they came back with this coffee brand I'd never seen, but they had a cup of hot coffee, and I stood in the window and I looked outside for a while, and I thought I drank coffee. And this is getting a $100 an hour person to go run, go fetch, and go get me some coffee. But they did. And I said to them, what you need to do is you need to have another computer out here that will split the load before these things ever see it into 5 pieces. And this thing will act as a giant switch. Everything comes in, and it'll split it and chop it up in 5 pieces. And when the load gets too much, you can add a 6th or a 7th. And they looked at me, and I said, the computer you need is this one from HP, and it costs about $2 million. And they said, okay. And I said, do you want me to help you call HP and get one? Because I had some contacts at HP. And they said, yes. And so we ordered it, and we ordered it on an emergency. And HP delivered. I'm telling you, these guys had that thing delivered in a week and setting it up. It was unbelievable. A $2 million computer. Order it. And they did. And I stayed there and worked for them for 3 more days, building a prototype version of C code that would sit here and do this switching process. And I charged them up the wazoo for this. Okay? I mean, you cannot believe how much I charged them for that project for a week-long set of work. So, yes. At the end of that, I got a new contract working for URS Griner, who had bought Woodward Clyde, and they were merging together. It was my last consulting project that I did for folks for a long time. And I took that project on the condition that I could use their data from their system in testing a product of my own. And I would anonymize the data, but I'd get to be able to collect it and use it. And I decided I should go into the tools business. Now, there's another guy, and the two of us knew each other real well. We were both in Denver, and we both decided that after a number of years of consulting that we were going to get out of the work of you go do some work, you get a paycheck, and it's kind of the bouncy little dog. Oh, a treat. Give me a treat, I'll jump. Give me another treat, I'll jump. Okay, and that's how consulting works. We decided we wanted to be product businesses where we actually built a product and sold it so we wouldn't be on this short leash of get a treat, do a trick, get a treat, do a trick. So we went out and spent a lot of time talking to each other about this. And we decided in the realm of Oracle there were 2 things to do. One was a performance tuning business based on some new stuff that Oracle had added to their Oracle database kernel, and the other one was storage management. And we kind of randomly picked which one each one of us was going to do. We were both going to start businesses and build it, and we had some ideas about how those businesses would work. And we each went out and did it, actually, And let's be serious about this. We both raised venture funding, and we both had successful exits. At the time when I did mine, there was 2 other companies in the United States. One had raised $9 million and the other $40 million to do the exact same storage management, automated database administration. And both of those companies eventually failed, and we succeeded. We raised $2.7 million, and we toughed it out, and we made it through lots of disasters. So at the end of it, my idea, or his idea, depending on who this came from, we discussed both of these things, was about half as good as his. As in, my venture-funded thing led to a $20 million exit, his led to a $40 million exit, and my contract with the company that bought our product AutoDBA was such that when I sold the company, I had to work for them for 3 years. I decided I didn't like working for them. And consequently, at the end of the 3 years, I quit, bought a sailboat, and took my family sailing for 5 years. So that's what I did. His contract was a little different. He ended up working for them for a decade before he got his $40 million. He didn't get $40 million. He got 10%, of that was his ownership at the end of his project. I got something like 22%. So, although his idea was twice as good as mine, the bottom line and what we got out of it was really about the same. Now, the 2% came from me doing some other things besides the sale of the company. I had 20% interest. So, literally, we basically got the same amount out. And that was, kind of the thing for building a product, is we built a database product. Now, could you go back and build the exact same products that we did back then, today? Absolutely. There is no question in my mind you could go back into that same market and you could build the same products we built then. The market is not saturated for those, and you could build them today and make money and get venture funding and do it all over again. And if any of you are interested in that, let's talk about it. I can go into the details of what you need to build today for that marketplace to make a successful project. And I have no doubts that you could get venture funding and do it all over again. And maybe make more money than we did. It's quite possible that you could walk away with a lot more than that. So, before I get off that subject, the thing that is driving a lot of stuff today, and I'm planning on doing a little bit of coverage of it in this class, is a thing called GQL, Graph Query Language. It's become a new standard. And GQL has the property of building interfaces, but your interfaces allow queries that extend far beyond a fixed set. We're going to do some stuff with a thing called REST in this class. But REST, you're going to limit what people can query to a fixed set so that you can tune the database to work well for that fixed set. With GQL, you don't get that opportunity. It is an object relational mapping based on graphs. And that means that they can query things that you never expected. And this is somehow considered an advantage, which it is. I don't dispute that. But it also means that you need an entirely different performance tuning engine. Okay, and the ones that we built back then for these companies apply to this in spades. And lots of applications are being built this way, and you need somebody, or you need a human being as a database administrator to sit there and manage and tune the database on an ongoing basis. And a database administrator is a $150,000 type person. So you can fix this with some software. Okay, I know it works. We did it once before. Or you can pay labor for maintenance. So that's kind of my background in what I did in databases. And at the end of this, I took 5 years off sailing, then I moved back here and started working on some other stuff, primarily security related and encryption stuff. And it was blockchain related, and that led me to the university, but I've still got lots of experience, and I've built consistently every year applications that are database related and use databases. So my experience is not so much in the consulting or tuning these days, although I still do that frequently, and we are going to cover some of that in class, but it is, here's what you do with a database, and here's how you build an application. And look at this new thing we've got out here, and here's going to be the pitfalls that are going to cause, this kind of a look on a lot of people. Okay? That's the look that you're going to get on a lot of people, because there's some pitfalls in this, and they're not dealing with those pitfalls. They're just using it because it gives them some flexibility. So, with that note, we're going to move on to content instead of history. At some point in this class, I actually want to go back and give you a short lecture on the history of databases, because it's something that you should know. But when we talk about that, we're also going to be hitting on a thing called ACID compliance and how important that is and why it is important. So that's my background and why I'm teaching this class is 20-some years of active development in applications for databases, and some of them are big applications. And I did the lead contract for ConAgra's installation of Oracle Financials and all the customization that was involved in that. So a lot of big applications, not just little things. All right, we'll catch you later.